The dim hum of the salvage drone filled the cockpit like a persistent whisper, its sensors sweeping the derelict station's corridors for anything of value. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the control yoke, her knuckles pale against the worn leather wrap, a human relic she'd scavenged from a museum exhibit back on Rigel Prime. At 42 cycles, Ilara was all sharp edges, cropped silver hair, eyes like fractured obsidian, and a caution forged from too many botched hauls. She didn't trust the drone's readings. Nothing out here was ever as empty as it seemed. Beside her, Jax leaned back in the co-pilot's seat, boots propped on the dash, fiddling with a holographic puzzle cube. The wiry mechanic was her opposite, witty, reckless, with a grin that could disarm a security bot. You know, Cap, if this place is as picked clean as the scans say, we might as well turn around. Last time we chased ghosts, I lost a finger. He wiggled the prosthetic one, its metallic joints clicking softly. Ilara shot him a sidelong glance. Ghosts pay better than honest work. And you're down to 9 fingers, plenty left to lose. The station loomed larger on the view screen, a skeletal lattice of alloy and forgotten tech orbiting a nameless gas giant. It had been human-built, or so the archives claimed, pre-extinction era, when their species still dotted the stars like fireflies before vanishing overnight. No war, no plague, just absence. The universe had moved on, but remnants like this drew scavengers like Ilara, chasing whispers of lost ingenuity. The docking clamps engaged with a shutter, sealing them to the station's airlock. Ilara suited up first, her movements precise, checking seals and oxygen levels twice. Jax followed, humming an old spacer tune, his toolkit slung over one shoulder. You think they really just poofed? No bodies, no signals. Kinda poetic if you ask me. Poetic doesn't fill the fuel tanks, Ilara muttered, cycling the lock. The inner door hissed open to a corridor bathed in emergency red light, dust motes swirling in the stale air. Their helmet lamps cut through the gloom, revealing graffiti etched into the bulkheads, human script, angular and defiant, "We endure." Now. They pivoted, but the rumble grew, a vibration that rattled their boots. Alarms wailed suddenly, ancient and shrill as bulkheads began to seal. The station was waking, or worse, defending itself. Ilara slammed her fist on the nearest panel, overriding the lockdown with a burst of static. The door to the corridor jammed halfway. Jax wedged his pry bar in, muscles straining. "Come on, you rusty bastard." With a final heave, it gave, and they tumbled through just as the cargo bay's outer seal clamped shut behind them. Panting in the red-lit hall, Ilara checked her suit's integrity. Oxygen good, but the station's systems were live, autonomous defenses perhaps triggered by their intrusion. What the hell was that? Archive said this place was dead. Jax wiped sweat from his brow, eyes wide. Dead things don't fight back. Whatever's in there, it doesn't want company. He glanced back at the sealed door, where faint thumps echoed like muffled footsteps. Ilara nodded, resolve hardening. They'd come for salvage, but now the station had become the challenge. A forgotten human fortress, guarding secrets with teeth. Retreat meant empty holds, pressing on risked everything. She unholstered her multi-tool, its blade glinting. "We came for ghosts. Let's see if they bite." The dim hum of the shuttle's engines faded as Zara sealed the airlock behind them, her gloved fingers lingering on the control panel. The corridor ahead stretched into shadow, lit only by sporadic emergency strips that flickered like dying stars. Crix adjusted his harness, the weight of his scanner pulling at his shoulder, while Lorne muttered something about the air recyclers tasting like recycled regret. "Scans show stable atmosphere," Crix said, his voice steady despite the echo. He was always the one pushing forward, boots clanging against the grated floor as if the ship weren't a tomb. But these bulkheads, twisted like they fought back. Zara nodded, her multi-lensed eyes scanning the readouts on her wrist display. She was the careful one, mapping every variable before committing. Human design. Reinforced alloys, but entropies had centuries. One wrong step and we could be breathing vacuum. Lorne snorted, fiddling with a jury-rigged light probe that cast erratic beams into the gloom. Entropy's polite company compared to what ditched this place. No bodies, no logs, just silence. Makes you wonder if they packed up for vacation. They moved in formation, Crix leading, his broad frame blocking the worst of the drafts that whispered through unseen cracks. The air grew thicker, laced with a metallic tang that clung to their suits. Zara's scanner beeped softly, tracing faint energy signatures along the walls, residual power from some forgotten core. A low groan echoed from ahead, like the ship settling into its grave. Crix froze, raising a hand. Hear that? Not structural. Something's active. Lorne's probe illuminated a junction box, its panel ajar, wires spilling like entrails. He knelt, tools already in hand. Active? This heap's deader than a neutron star. But yeah, faint pulse. Like a heartbeat on life support. Zara crouched beside him, her caution warring with curiosity. Don't touch it blind. Human tech was unpredictable. Adaptive, they called it. Could be a security protocol waking up. Crix peered down the corridor where shadows pooled around a sealed door marked with faded symbols, a circle bisected by a line universal for warning. We came for answers, not tea parties. If it's human ingenuity left behind, it might explain why the galaxy's signals went dark after them. Lorne pried the panel wider, sparks dancing from his probe. The pulse quickened, syncing with the ship's groan. Ingenuity or insanity? Look. Microcircuitry, self-repairing. These wires are knitting themselves. The door ahead hissed, seals cracking open on their own. Cold air rushed out, carrying motes of dust that swirled in the light like lost souls. Zara's scanner spiked, readings climbing into the red. Energy surge. It's drawing power from somewhere deep. We need to. A sharp crack split the air. The floor buckled beneath Lorne, a hidden seam giving way. He scrambled back, tools clattering as Crix lunged to haul him up. Zara's beam caught the chasm below, twisted metal and void, dropping into the ship's underbelly. Close call, Lorne gasped, dusting off his suit, but his wit faltered, eyes wide. That wasn't random. The ships, reacting to us. Crix pulled them onward toward the half-open door. Then we react faster. Whatever's in there, it's the key. Humans didn't just leave, they engineered their exit. And if this is what's left, it's not done yet. Beyond the threshold, the chamber unfolded. Consoles dark but humming, screens flickering with ghostly code. In the center, a crystalline core pulsed, veins of light threading through it like blood in glass. Zara approached slowly, her breath fogging her visor. The pulse matched their heartbeats now, sinking, inviting. It's alive, she whispered. Or as close as machines get. But why activate now? Lorne tapped the console, data scrolling in fragmented bursts, star maps, equations, warnings in a dead language. Because we're here. The absence, it's not empty. It's waiting. The core brightened, projecting a hologram, a human silhouette, arms outstretched, dissolving into static. The groan returned, deeper, as if the ship mourned. Crix gripped his scanner tighter. Waiting for what? Us to finish what they started. Tension coiled in the air, the chamber's walls vibrating subtly. Zara traced the hologram's edge, her caution cracking. Or to warn us. Their ingenuity wasn't just tools, it was legacy. And this feels like the beginning of something breaking free. Outside, through a viewport, the derelict fleet loomed, silent sentinels in the void. But now lights winked on across the hulls, a chain reaction sparking to life. The universe, long quiet since humanity's fade, stirred. Kale gripped the console edge as the shuttle shuddered through the nebulous fringe, violet gases swirling like angry spirits against the viewport. His claws dug into the worn synth leather, a habit from cycles of piloting freighters through safer voids. Beside him, Lyra scanned the readouts, her multifaceted eyes flickering with data streams. Always the analyst, precise where he was impulsive. Proximity alert, she said, voice steady but laced with that undercurrent of caution she never shook. The human relic is 2 clicks ahead, but the interference is spiking. Could be residual energy fields. Ren, crammed in the back with their gear crates, snorted. Or it's just another ghost story. We've chased enough of those. The engineer wiped grease from his mandibles, his bulk shifting uncomfortably in the harness. He was the pragmatist, the one who fixed what broke, but even he couldn't hide the tension in his twitching antennae. Kale nodded, easing the throttle. The shuttle dipped, engines humming low to avoid stirring the nebulous charged particles. They'd come this far on fragments of lore, whispers from ancient archives about humanity's vanishing, a species that built stars and tamed black holes, only to erase themselves from existence. Their mission: salvage anything that explained it before the Coalition's rivals claimed the prize. But out here in the graveyard of their worlds, the real threat was the unknown. A jolt rocked them as they breached the relic's outer shell, a colossal ring half-shattered, orbiting a dead sun. Alarms blared. "Shields at 60%, Lyra reported, her fingers dancing over controls. "Something's pulling us in." Kale's heart raced. He fired retros, but the shuttle bucked like a live wire. Through the haze, the ring resolved. A habitat station, vast and skeletal, its spokes twisted from some cataclysmic force. Human design, unmistakable, curved lines efficient yet elegant, unlike the blocky Coalition builds. "Hold on," Ren growled, unstrapping to brace a loose panel. Sparks flew from the NAV array. Kale wrestled the stick, sweat beading under his exosuit. Hay skimmed a protruding girder, close enough to scrape hull paint, before stabilizing in a docking cradle that shouldn't have been there. Silence fell, broken only by the creak of settling metal. "Lyra ihalid." But scans show unstable core, could be a reactor breach or worse. Kale unbuckled, grabbing his toolkit. "Then we move fast. Ren, seal the airlock. Lyra, you're on sensors. If this thing's got humanity's secrets, we grab him before it grabs us." They cycled through the corridor beyond a dim tunnel of flickering emergency lights. Dust motes danced in the stale air, recycled after eons. Kale's light beam caught faded markings on the walls. Symbols, equations perhaps, etched with a permanence that defied decay. His mandibles clicked in awe. Humans hadn't just lived here, they'd woven their ingenuity into the bones of space. Footsteps echoed softly as they advanced. Ren muttered about pressure seals, testing a hatch. Lyra's scanner hummed, mapping corridors that branched like neural pathways. But as they rounded a corner, the floor trembled, a low groan from deep within the structure. "Structural integrity dropping, Lyra varnet." Something's waking up. Kale pushed forward, driven by the pull of discovery. The challenge wasn't just the relic's decay, it was the void left by those who'd built it. If humanity's absence had unmade the stars, what would it do to them? He shoved the thought aside, focusing on the next hatch. Answers lay beyond, if they could reach them without becoming the next extinction. The dim glow of the archive chamber flickered like a dying star as Alara traced her fingers over the holographic interface. The air hummed with the low vibration of ancient servers, pulling data from the void where humanity's records had once burned bright. She was the last of the curators, a Vexery scholar whose people prized knowledge above all else, yet even they had faltered in the face of this silence. Beside her, Kor, the burly engineer from the Gridari clan, fiddled with a makeshift probe, his 4 arms whirring in precise, frustrated motions. "This isn't right," he muttered, his voice a gravelly rumble that echoed off the curved walls. "The signals should be converging by now. It's like the universe is swallowing them whole." Alara didn't look up. Her elongated neck tilted slightly, eyes narrowing at the swirling patterns on the display, fragments of human transmissions, pieced together from derelict probes drifting in the outer rims. They spoke of ingenuity, of ships that bent space with nothing but clever alloys and unyielding will. But the patterns ended abruptly, as if a hand had clapped over the galaxy's mouth. The challenge wasn't just the data, it was the growing rift in their expedition. Supplies were thinning, fuel cells depleting faster than predicted, the environmental seals on their vessel straining against micrometeorite pockmarks. One wrong calibration, and they'd be adrift, another forgotten echo in the cosmos. Kor slammed a fist against the console, the impact sending a ripple through the holograph. "We can't keep chasing ghosts. The council back home is already whispering about pulling funding. If we don't find a solid lead, this whole venture's scrap." His words hung heavy, laced with the caution that defined his kind, practical to a fault, always weighing risks against the grind of survival. Alara felt a pang of irritation. She was the dreamer here, driven by a curiosity that bordered on obsession. But Kor was right. Their third attempt at decoding the human migration vectors had backfired spectacularly, overloading the archive's core and erasing half their backups. Now, with the chamber's temperature creeping upward from the strain, tension coiled in her chest like a spring. She stepped back, rubbing her temples where the neural implant throbbed. "Then we adapt. Look here." She pointed to a faint anomaly in the data stream, a cluster of irregular pulses that didn't match any known stellar interference. It was subtle, like footprints in cosmic dust, hinting at deliberate obfuscation. Humans, it seemed, hadn't vanished, they'd hidden. Or been erased. The thought sent a chill through her scales. If their absence was the universe's first true extinction, not of bodies but of potential, what did that mean for species like hers who built empires on borrowed stars? Kor leaned in, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the glow. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft beep of the probe locking onto the signal. "All right," he said finally, a grudging respect edging his tone. "But if this leads to another dead end, we're rerouting to the nearest depot." No arguments. Ilara nodded, though her mind raced ahead. They worked in tandem now, her guiding the scan while he reinforced the failing seals with strips of adaptive foil. The chamber warmed further, sweat beading on Kor's ridged brow, but the pulses sharpened, coordinates emerging from the noise, pointing toward a forgotten nebula. As the data solidified, Ilara's heart quickened. This wasn't failure, it was a pivot. But the cost lingered in the air, the dimming light signaling another power drain, a reminder that every revelation demanded a toll. Outside, the void pressed on, indifferent to their grit. The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered across Ilara's face as she hunched over the controls, her fingers dancing with a precision born of desperation. The ship, once a gleaming testament to the old Alliance engineering, now groaned under the strain of patched-together systems, its hull scarred from the asteroid field's merciless barrage. Kale, her co-pilot and the only other soul aboard who hadn't jumped ship at the first sign of trouble, leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, his usual wry grin replaced by a tight line of worry. "We've got maybe 12 hours before the core overheats," Ilara said, not looking up. Her voice was steady, but the slight tremor in her hands betrayed the lie. The environmental hazard wasn't just the void outside, it was the failing life support, sucking away their air molecule by molecule, a silent thief in the night. Kale pushed off the wall, pacing the cramped bridge. And the distress beacon? Still nothing? He glanced at the scanner, its screen a barren sea of static. No signals, no ships, no signs of the vast interstellar network that had once buzzed with life. Since humanity vanished, poof, gone in a blink 5 cycles ago, the galaxy had unraveled. Trade routes collapsed, colonies starved, and now even the automated relays were failing, one by one. "Dead air," she confirmed, slamming a fist lightly on the panel. A spark jumped, and she jerked back, cursing under her breath. Brave as she was, Ilara had stared down pirate swarms without flinching. This creeping isolation clawed at her differently. It wasn't a fight you could punch your way out of. He stopped pacing, eyes narrowing on the NAV chart. A faint blip hovered at the edge. Zorith Station, an abandoned human outpost, orbiting a gas giant. Legends said it was where the first contact happened, where humans shared their impossible tech, fusion drives, neural links, the grit to build empires from scrap. But no one had heard from it since the absence. What if we divert? It's risky, but those old docks might have salvage. Air scrubbers, power cells, something to buy us time. Ilara straightened, rubbing her temples. The plan sounded desperate, and it was. Their current course led to a derelict mining rig, but that was a gamble on ghosts. Zorith? That was diving into the heart of the mystery. You're talking about legends, Kale. Humans built it to last, sure, but without them, it's just floating junk. Or it's the key. His voice dropped, earnest now, the cautious engineer giving way to the dreamer who'd followed her into this mess. They didn't just disappear, Ilara. The probes say the stars are dimming, ecosystems collapsing on a dozen worlds. Whatever took them is unraveling everything. If Zorith holds answers, a low rumble shook the deck, cutting him off. Alarms blared, structural integrity dropping. The asteroid field had spat them out, but not without cost. A microfracture in the outer hull, venting atmosphere in thin wisps. Ilara's heart pounded as she sealed the breach protocols, but the readings climbed. They had to move. "Fine," she said, plotting the course. The ship lurched as thrusters fired, angling toward the gas giant's swirling storms. Tension coiled in the air, thick as the clouds below. Kale strapped in beside her, his hand brushing hers, a silent pact. No speeches, just action. But as Zorith loomed on the view screen, a skeletal silhouette against the planet's rage. Ilara wondered if they were flying toward salvation or the same void that had claimed the makers. Hours blurred into a tense vigil. The storms battered them, lightning forking like accusations across the viewport. Ilara adjusted shields, sweat beading on her brow, while Kale monitored the docking clamps. "Coming up on approach," he muttered. "Looks intact barely." The station rotated into view, its arms outstretched like a forgotten plea. Docking clamps engaged with a metallic screech, and the ship shuddered to a halt. Silence followed, broken only by the hum of failing systems. Ilara unstrapped, grabbing her toolkit. "Suit up. We go in, grab what we need, get out. No sightseeing." Kale nodded, but his eyes lingered on the airlock. Through the reinforced glass, the station's corridors yawned dark and empty, lit sporadically by emergency strips. Human ingenuity had built this place. Modular, adaptable, designed to thrive where others failed. Now it felt like a tomb. They cycled through, the hiss of equalizing pressure echoing their footsteps. The air inside was stale, laced with the metallic tang of disuse, but breathable. Ilara's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing bulkheads etched with faded murals. Humans and aliens side by side, laughing under alien suns. A pang hit her. Camaraderie lost, the kind that had glued the galaxy together. "Life support core should be this way," Kale whispered, consulting a cracked datapad scavenged from the ship's logs. They moved in sync, boots magnetized to the floor, every shadow a potential threat. A loose panel clattered suddenly, and Ilara spun, pulse racing. Nothing. Just the station settling, or so she hoped. Deeper in, the corridors narrowed, debris floating lazily, tools, papers, a child's toy drifting like a lost memory. "They left in a hurry," Ilara said, catching the toy midair. It was a model ship, human-made, with tiny engines that once lit up. Now dark. Kale pried open an access hatch, revealing the core room. Banks of servers hummed faintly, but most were cold. "Jackpot," he breathed, pulling a power cell. Kaler gripped the console edge, his claws scraping faint lines into the worn plasteel as the ship's alarms wailed in staccato bursts. The view screen flickered with static-laced feeds from the outer sensors, showing the asteroid field's relentless churn, jagged rocks tumbling like forgotten debris from some cosmic demolition. "We're blind out there," he muttered, his voice a low rumble over the din beside him. Lyra hunched over the auxiliary panel, her tendrils weaving through holographic readouts with frantic precision. She was the steady one, always had been, her caution a counterweight to his impulsive drives. The initial scan had promised a clear path, a narrow vein through the field rich with untapped minerals. But the readings lied, or the equipment did, sabotaged by the lingering echo of that human probe they'd salvaged weeks ago. Its code had burrowed deep, twisting their NAV systems into knots. Now, with the engines sputtering from the overload, they were committed to the gauntlet. "Divert power to forward shields," Kaler ordered, his multifaceted eyes narrowing at the looming silhouette of a house-sized boulder drifting into their lane. Lyra's tendrils paused, then complied, rerouting energy with a soft chime. The ship groaned as the shields flared, bathing the bridge in blue light. But it wasn't enough. The rock clipped their starboard wing, a shuddering impact that sent sparks dancing across the bulkheads. Alarms escalated, red lights pulsing like a frantic heartbeat. "Hull integrity at 70%, Lyra reported, her tone clipped, betraying the fear she rarely voiced. "We can't take another hit like that." Kaler unstrapped, rising to his full height, his armored exoskeleton clicking softly. He wasn't one for waiting. Bravery had always been his anchor, even when it bordered on recklessness. "Manual override. I'll take the auxiliary controls." He moved to the secondary station, fingers dancing over the joysticks, feeling the ship's sluggish response like a wounded beast. The field seemed to sense their vulnerability, boulders converging in a deadly ballet. One grazed the underbelly, the screech of metal echoing through the corridors. From the engineering bay, Zoratha's voice crackled over the comm. The mechanic was the wit among them, his sarcasm a shield against the void's indifference. "If you two lovebirds are done flirting with disaster, I've got a patch on the engines. But it's jury-rigged, 30 seconds of thrust, tops. Make it count, Captain, or we're fancy space dust." Kaler barked a laugh, short and sharp. "Flattery will get you extra rations, Zorath. On my mark." He watched the scan, picking a threadbare gap between two spinning fragments. Lyra's input fed him adjustments, her calculations a lifeline in the chaos. Mark. The engines roared to life, a brief surge propelling them forward. The ship twisted, evading a crusher by mere meters, the rush of airless vacuum outside silent but imagined in the creak of straining frames. They burst through the narrowest pinch, debris pinging off the reinforced hull like hail on a fragile roof. But triumph soured quickly. As the field thinned, a new alert blared. Life signs, faint but unmistakable, emanating from the largest asteroid ahead. Not natural. Not theirs. Kaler's grip tightened. The human artifact had led them here, but what waited wasn't salvage. It was something alive, stirring in the dark heart of the rock. A remnant, perhaps, of the species whose absence had unraveled the stars. Lyra leaned closer to the screen, her tendrils stilling. It's broadcasting. Old frequencies. Human? The word hung heavy, laced with the awe and dread that shadowed every encounter with their ghosts. Zoratha's calm crackled again. Whatever it is, it's pulling power from our grid. Like it's hungry. The ship slowed, caught in an invisible tether as the asteroid loomed larger, its surface pocked with artificial scars. Kaler felt the weight of decision settle. Push forward, claim whatever secret pulsed there, or cut loose and limp home empty-handed? The cost of the field had already claimed a chunk of their hull, their supplies dwindling with every repair. But turning back now meant admitting the human shadow still eclipsed them, their ingenuity a curse that outlived them. Prepare docking clamps, he said finally, voice steady. Lyra shot him a look, cautious eyes questioning, but she nodded, initiating the sequence. As the ship aligned, the broadcast strengthened. A fragmented signal, voices in a tongue long dead, pleading or warning, it was impossible to tell. The air on the bridge grew thick, the adventure's earnest pull now laced with the sharp tang of risk. They were pioneers, after all, in a universe hollowed by absence. To retreat was to let the extinction claim another piece of the stars. Kale gripped the rusted railing, his claws scraping against the flaking metal as the station shuddered again. The air recyclers hummed erratically, spitting out bursts of stale oxygen laced with the metallic tang of decay. Below them, in the vast chamber they dubbed the core, the human artifact pulsed with a faint, erratic blue light, like a dying star refusing to fade. See? It's stabilizing, Lyra said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her tail. She adjusted the makeshift probe, a tangle of their ship's salvaged wiring jury-rigged to interface with the ancient console. The cautious xenobiologist in her had argued against this from the start, but necessity had won out. Their fuel cells were down to fumes, and the nearest relay beacon was weeks away through uncharted void. Without cracking this human relic's secrets, they'd drift forever. Zorak snorted, wiping lubricant from his multifaceted eyes. Stabilizing? That's what you said last cycle, before it fried our auxiliary scanner. The engineer paced the catwalk, his wiry frame buzzing with frustration. He'd always been the witty one, quick with a quip to lighten the load, but now his mandibles clicked in irritation. The plan had been simple. Interface with the station's AI core, siphon its dormant power reserves. Humans had built this behemoth centuries ago, or so the archives claimed, before their inexplicable vanishing. A goldmine of ingenuity, or so they'd hoped. The shudder intensified, metal groaning like a wounded beast. Alarms blared from the console, harsh, synthesized wails in a language none of them understood, but the intent was clear. Kale's hearts pounded. As leader, he'd pushed them here, drawn by the signal that pierced the galaxy's silence. Humanity's echo, the probes had called it. But echoes didn't bite back. Lyra yanked the probe free just as sparks erupted, showering the platform in white-hot flecks. Back. It's overloading. She scrambled toward the access hatch, her lab coat singed at the edges. Zorak was already there, prying it open with a hydraulic lever he'd fashioned from scrap. Kale hesitated, eyes locked on the core. Through the haze, he glimpsed holographic fragments flickering to life. Vast fleets of angular ships, worlds teeming with fragile, bipedal forms. Humans. Their creators. Their ghosts. A bulkhead buckled nearby, slamming down with a deafening clang. Kale dove rolling across the grated floor as debris rained. His suit's integrity held, but the impact jarred his limbs. Zorak, seal it. Lyra status. Cores venting plasma. Containment failing. Lyra shouted over the din, her scanner beeping furiously. If it breaches, this whole sector goes up. We're talking cascade failure across the ring. Zorak wrestled the hatch shut, his tools clattering. Great. Our clever adaptation just painted a target on our backs. What now, fearless one? Pray to the void. Kale hauled himself up, ignoring the jab. The three of them huddled in the narrow corridor, the station's artificial gravity flickering. Lights dimmed, then surged, casting long shadows that danced like specters. They'd come seeking answers to the great silence, the absence that had hollowed the stars since humanity's fall. Legends whispered that their ingenuity had woven the galaxy's threads, from warp drives to neural nets that mimicked thought itself. But this felt like unraveling. Lyra tapped her comm, pulling up the partial schematic they'd pieced together. The auxiliary bays, there's a human manual override there. Old tech, but if we can reroute the power flow manually. Zorak's eyes gleamed. Manually? With what? Our bare claws. Humans didn't build for multi-limbed folk like us. We adapt, Kale said, his voice firm. Brave, that's what they called him. Reckless, maybe, but it had gotten them this far. Like they did. We follow their design. It's not just power we need, it's proof. That their absence wasn't the end, but a warning. The station lurched again, a deep rumble vibrating through the walls. Somewhere below, the core's light flared brighter, illuminating fractured views of human history. Cities of glass-piercing skies, hands linking in defiant unity. Lyra nodded, pocketing her scanner. Then we move. Before it decides we're the next extinction. They pushed off, weaving through collapsing corridors, the weight of forgotten grit propelling them forward. The void outside waited, patient and vast, but here in the bones of human ambition, survival demanded more than caution. It required their own spark of ingenuity. The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered across Zara's face as she hunched over the control panel, her fingers dancing across the ancient human interface. The ship, a patchwork of salvaged human tech and their own clunky modifications, groaned under the strain of the nebula's electromagnetic interference. Crix floated nearby, his tentacles twitching with anxiety, cross-referencing data streams on a holographic display that sputtered like a dying star. We can't keep pushing her like this, Crix muttered, his voice a low buzz through the comms. The core's overheating. One more surge and we'll be drifting debris. Zara didn't look up, her mandibles clicking in determination. Then we adapt. Humans didn't build this for comfort, they built it for survival. She rerouted power from the non-essentials, the lights dimming further until shadows pooled in the corners of the bridge. The plan had been simple. Skirt the nebula's edge, harvest the rare isotopes needed to stabilize their warp drive, and slip back to the relay station before the rival consortium caught wind. But the nebula had other ideas, its storms flaring unpredictably, lashing the hull with plasma bursts that scrambled their sensors. Lyra's voice crackled from the pilot's nook, sharp and laced with her usual sarcasm. Oh, brilliant. Because nothing says survival like turning us into a floating barbecue. Zara, if we lose NAV control, we're not adapting, we're extinct. A jolt rocked the ship, sending Crix slamming into a bulkhead. Alarms wailed, red lights pulsing like a frantic heartbeat. Zara gripped the console, scanning the readouts. The harvester drone they deployed was caught in a current, its tether fraying under the assault. Isotopes gleamed in the feed, enough to buy them weeks of travel, but retrieving it meant venturing out. Suit up, Zara said, already moving toward the airlock. Her voice carried the weight of command, steady despite the knot in her gut. Humans had faced worse, she reminded herself, piecing together fragments from the archives. Crews venturing into voids, rigging fixes with spit and ingenuity. This was their inheritance, flawed as it was. Crix hesitated, his eyes wide. You're not serious. The storm's peaking. One breach and we fail the mission. Zara sealed her helmet, the hiss of oxygen grounding her. Stay here, monitor from the bridge. Lyra, keep us steady. Lyra snorted over the link. Steady? In this soup? You're the boss, but if I end up as nebula fodder, I'm haunting your dreams. Zara launched the airlock cycle, the void yawning before her like an open maw. The drone's beacon pulsed faintly through the interference, a lone firefly in the chaos. She magnetized her boots to the hull and pushed off, the tether line whipping behind her. Winds of ionized gas tugged at her suit, static crackling across her visor. The nebula's heart swirled in hues of violet and crimson, a living storm that had claimed countless vessels since humanity's fade. Halfway to the drone, a fresh surge hit. The ship bucked and Zara's line snapped taut, yanking her sideways. She clawed for purchase on a protruding antenna, her breath fogging the helmet. Below, or what passed for below in the drift, the drone spun wildly, isotopes spilling like glittering blood. "Come on," she growled, hauling herself forward inch by agonizing inch. The human tech in her suit whirred, servos compensating for the pull, a testament to designs that bent physics without breaking. But it wasn't enough. Another gust slammed her, and the drone's arm fractured, crystals scattering into the ether. Back on the bridge, Crix's voice broke through. "Zara, it's gone. Pull back, we've lost it." No. She extended her grapple, firing it toward the drone's core. It latched, but the recoil sent her tumbling, the line paying out too fast. The nebula roared in her ears, a symphony of destruction. Humans had stared down black holes, she thought, their grit etched in every weld and code. She wouldn't let it end like this. With a surge of thrusters, she reeled in the drone, fragments clutched in her gauntlets. But as she turned back, the ship's silhouette blurred, a rival scout vessel emerging from the storm's fringe, its weapons priming with a predatory gleam. Their plan hadn't just backfired, it had drawn hunters. Zara kicked toward the airlock, heart pounding. The isotopes burned cold in her hands, a fragile victory amid rising doom. They had the fuel, but now the consortium knew their trail. Escape wouldn't come easy. Zorak gripped the console's edge, his tendrils quivering as the ship's alarms wailed in staccato bursts. The derelict human vessel they'd boarded hours ago, dubbed the Endeavor by its faded hull markings, had seemed stable enough at first. A relic from the vanished race, adrift in the void for centuries, its corridors echoing with the ghosts of ingenuity. But now the air recyclers hummed erratically, pulling in stale breaths laced with metallic tang. Lyra cursed under her breath, her multifaceted eyes narrowing at the jury-rigged panel she'd pried open. "These human circuits are a nightmare," she muttered, her voice a rapid clip of frustration. Twisted logic like they built it to confuse anyone but themselves. The power surge fried half the relays when we tried bridging to our shuttle. Vex, ever the bold one, wiped sweat from his scaled brow and hefted the makeshift tool, a salvaged human wrench fused with their own plasma cutter. He plunged it into the exposed wiring without hesitation, sparks flying like angry fireflies. "Then we adapt their way. Remember the logs we decrypted? They didn't quit when systems failed, they improvised. Watch this." The chamber shuddered, a deep groan rippling through the bulkheads as another structural stress wave hit. Outside, through the viewport, the asteroid field loomed larger, chunks of rock tumbling in lazy menace. Their shuttle was tethered precariously, but the Endeavor's decaying orbit was pulling them inexorably toward collision. Zorak's caution had kept them alive this far, insisting on triple checks, mapping every hatch before entry, but now it felt like hesitation. The stakes pressed in. If they couldn't restart the auxiliary engines, the whole expedition would end in a silent crunch, their findings on humanity's extinction lost forever. "Status." Zorak barked, his voice steady despite the knot in his midsection. Lyra yanked a wire free, her claws clicking against the casing. "Oxygen at 30% and dropping. If Vex shorts this again, we'll be breathing vacuum before the rocks hit us." She shot him a wry glance, the wit in her tone cutting through the tension like a laser. "Unless your human grit includes holding our breaths." Vex grinned, teeth flashing, and twisted the tool deeper. A low hum built, vibrating up his arm, then steadied into a rhythmic pulse. Lights flickered on along the panel, bathing their faces in harsh blue. "There. Auxiliary power online. But its patchwork won't hold more than a burn to clear the field." Zorak nodded, relief mingling with resolve. He activated the comms, patching through to their mothership orbiting distant. "Captain to base, we've stabilized the core." Human design held up, barely. Transmitting final data burst now. The screen lit with streams of code, schematics, journals, the haunting final entries from the Endeavor's crew, detailing a plague or anomaly that had wiped humanity from the stars. But as the upload began, a new alarm pierced the air. Proximity alert. Lyra's eyes widened. Incoming debris, Big One, trajectory locked on our docking arm. Vex was already moving, grabbing a harness from the wall. I'll manual sever the tether if needed. Get to the shuttle. No, Zorak said, his caution yielding to command. We finish this. Their absence, it's not just loss. It's a warning. We pull this off, we honor it. He strapped in beside Lyra, who fired up the makeshift controls. The ship lurched as Vex dashed down the corridor, his footsteps echoing like distant thunder. The rock hurtled closer, a jagged monolith blotting the stars. Lyra's hands danced over the levers, coaxing the engines to life with a sputter and roar. Hold together, you ancient beast, she whispered as if the machine could hear. In the engineering bay, Vex reached the airlock, plasma cutter whining. The tether line thrummed with strain, the shuttle pulling against the Endeavor's decay. He sliced clean, the line whipping free like a severed vein, propelling their craft clear just as the asteroid grazed the hull with a deafening scrape. Metal screamed, but they held. Back in the control room, Zorak watched the shuttle drift safely, the data upload complete at 98%. A chunk of the Endeavor's wing sheared off, spinning into the void, a tangible scar, a reminder that even triumphs came scarred. Lyra slumped against her seat, exhaling. We made it. But that was too close. What were they thinking, building ships that fight back like this? Zorak's tendrils stilled, gazing at the stars where humanity had once shone. They were thinking ahead. Further than we ever did. The final upload chimed, sealing their discovery. Humanity's extinction wasn't the end of life in the universe, but the birth of its fragility. Without their unyielding spark, the cosmos felt emptier, more perilous. And as the shuttle rendezvoused, the crew carried that weight, a quiet vow to bridge the absence they'd unearthed. The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered across Alara's face, casting shadows that danced like ghosts in the cramped cockpit. She leaned forward, her claws tapping a staccato rhythm on the armrest, eyes fixed on the holographic display. The probe's signal had strengthened, pulling them deeper into the derelict station's orbit, but the readings were fracturing, bursts of anomalous energy that defied the scanner's logic. Kale, reroute power to the forward arrays, she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. If this is a trap, we'll see it coming. Kale grunted from the engineering nook, his broad frame hunched over a nest of exposed conduits. Grease streaked his fur, and his tail flicked irritably as he twisted a valve. Cautious as ever, he'd argued against docking earlier, citing the station's eerie silence as a warning from the void itself. But Alara's resolve had won out. They needed answers, and this husk of human engineering was the last breadcrumb in their trail. Power's thin, he muttered, voice gravelly through the comm. One surge and we're blind. You sure about this? Before she could reply, Lyra's sharp laugh cut through the tension from the NAV station. The scientist's antennae twitched, her slender fingers flying across the interface. Witty and irreverent, she masked her fear with barbs, but Alara saw the tremor in her grip. Oh, we're sure. Because floating out here debating philosophy with dead stars is so productive. Look, the probe's latched onto something. Structural integrity at 23%, but there's a power signature. Faint like a heartbeat. The ship shuddered as they closed in, the station looming larger on the view screen. A colossal skeleton of alloy and forgotten ambition, its solar sails tattered like ancient banners. Humans had built it eons ago, before their inexplicable vanishing. Legends whispered of their ingenuity, their unyielding drive to connect the stars, but now in the wake of their absence entire sectors withered. Worlds that once teemed with life now echoed with silence, ecosystems collapsing in chains of unintended consequence. Alara's people, the Vexery, had traced the decay to this point, piecing together fragments of human data logs that hinted at a safeguard, a final gift left behind. Docking clamps engaged with a metallic groan, sealing them to the station's scarred hull. Alara stood, sealing her suit with a hiss, her brave facade cracking just enough for Kale to notice. He rose too, toolkit in hand, his cautious eyes scanning her. Plan simple, scan the core out. No ruix. Lyra smirked, holstering her scanner. Says the one who packed 3 backup suits. Led on, Captain Optimism. They cycled through the airlock into a corridor choked with dust and debris, emergency lights pulsing faintly overhead. The air recyclers hummed sporadically, a relic breath from a bygone era. Ilara's beams swept the gloom, illuminating faded murals, humans and exosuits, reaching toward stylized galaxies, their faces alight with determination. One image stuck, a lone figure planting a seed in barren soil, roots spreading like neural networks. Deeper in, the corridor narrowed, forcing them single file. Kale took point, his scanner beeping warnings of microfractures in the bulkheads. Radiation spikes ahead. Could be the core leaking. Tension coiled in Ilara's chest. Their mission wasn't just curiosity. Back on Vexor Prime, the Blight had claimed her brother's pod, silent husks where vibrant young once grew. If this station held the key to humanity's lost knowledge, it could stem the tide. A sudden tremor rocked the deck, panels groaning as if the station itself protested their intrusion. Lyra yelped, grabbing a rung. That wasn't us. Structural failure? Move! Ilara barked, shoving forward. They burst into the central chamber, a vast dome cracked like an eggshell, stars winking through the fissures. At its heart stood the core, a towering obelisk of crystalline circuits, humming with subdued light. But as they approached, the tremor escalated, a deep rumble building from below. Kale's scanner wailed. It's not failing, it's activating. Something's powering up. Ilara's heart raced. The obelisk's surface shimmered, projecting a holographic cascade, human voices, fragmented and urgent, narrating protocols for a galactic stabilizer. Images flooded the air, thriving biospheres, then cascades of decay post-humanity, chains of extinction triggered by unchecked cosmic entropy. Their absence hadn't just left a void, it had unraveled the delicate balances they'd maintained. But the activation demanded input, a sequence locked behind riddles of human logic, puzzles woven from their gritty ingenuity. Lyra's eyes widened, her wit sharpening into focus. It's a test. We have to solve it or the core overloads and takes the sector with it. Kale hesitated, claws flexing. We turned back. This is beyond us. Ilara met his gaze, her bravery igniting. No. We adapt like they did. Together. As the rumble intensified, shards of the dome began to rain down, forcing them into the obelisk's shadow. The stakes pressed in, real and immediate, their survival, their world's fragile hope, hanging on deciphering the ghosts of humanity's final stand. The dim glow of the emergency beacons flickered across the control chamber, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts on the bulkheads. Lyra gripped the console edge, her claws scraping against the worn alloy, as the ship's alarms wailed in a relentless chorus. The void outside the viewport was a swirling maelstrom of debris, fragments of the ancient human station they'd come to salvage, now tearing into their hull like vengeful specters. We're venting atmosphere on decks 4 through 7, she reported, her voice steady despite the tremor in her tail. Beside her, Kale hunched over the navigation array, his fur matted with sweat, fingers flying across the holographic interface. Torin, ever the cautious one, floated in from the access hatch, his suit patched hastily from an earlier breach. The thrusters are at 30%. If we don't equalize pressure soon, we'll lose the core. He didn't look up from sealing a conduit, his movements precise, born of cycles spent maintaining forgotten relics. The three of them had been a makeshift crew for what felt like lifetimes. Lyra the bold pilot, Kale the quick-witted engineer, Torin the steadfast guardian of their fragile vessel. What started as a routine expedition to the human drift, that graveyard of their long-lost progenitors, had spiraled into this. A desperate bid to harness the station's dormant fusion heart before the solar flare's radiation cooked them alive. Kale's ears twitched as another shudder rocked the ship. The human logs were right. This thing's safeguards are kicking in. It's not just powering up, it's fighting back. He pulled up a schematic, the lines glowing faintly against the red emergency lights. The station, a colossal relic from humanity's expansion era, had awakened partially under their prodding, its automated defenses mistaking their intrusion for a threat. Automated drones had swarmed earlier, forcing them to retreat, but now the real peril loomed. The flare's electromagnetic pulse was destabilizing the relic's core, threatening to chain react and obliterate the entire sector. Lyra's eyes narrowed on the scanner readouts. A plan had formed in the frantic hours since their first failure. The docking clamps had sheared off, stranding them in the debris field, but it hinged on reaching the auxiliary control node. We go manual. Torin, you and I suit up for the EVA. Kale, keep her steady and route power to the grapples. Torin hesitated, his gaze flicking to the viewport where a chunk of hull plating tumbled perilously close. That's suicide. The field's too dense. But Lyra shot him a grin, fierce and unyielding. Or it's the only way we honor what they left us. Humans didn't build this to rust away. They launched from the airlock in a haze of escaping vapor, the tether lines whipping taut as the ship bucked. Debris pelted their suits like hail from a cosmic storm, sparks flying where fragments grazed the reinforced plating. Lyra led, her jetpack bursts propelling her toward the station's gaping maw, Torin close behind, hauling the makeshift interface tool, a cobbled-together probe from scavenged human tech. The flare's corona bloomed on their visors, a searing white arc that painted the void in stark relief, every shadow a potential grave. Inside the station's corridors, Zero-G twisted their path into a labyrinth of floating wreckage. Lyra sliced through a jammed bulkhead with her plasma cutter, the blue flame illuminating faded murals, human figures and exosuits reaching for stars, their faces etched with that inexplicable grit. Look at this, she breathed over comms, but there was no time for awe. A groan echoed through the structure as the core's instability mounted, vibrations humming through their boots. Torin anchored the probe, his hands steady as he initiated the bypass. Linking now. Kale, you reading? Back on the ship, Kale's voice crackled through static. Barely. Pulse is spiking, you've got minutes before it goes critical. Sweat beaded on his brow as he rerouted what power he could, the console sparking in protest. The camaraderie that had bound them through barren halls and narrow escapes felt stretched thin now, each decision a thread in the tapestry of survival. The probe whirred to life, interfacing with the human system's archaic protocols. Alarms blared in their helmets, warnings in a dead language translated haltingly by their implants. Asterisk, containment breach imminent. Evacuate. Asterisk, but Lyra pushed on, overriding the lockdown with a sequence pieced from fragmented archives. The core's hum deepened, stabilizing inch by agonizing inch, as if the station itself relented, recognizing allies in their desperation. Torin pulled her back just as a pressure wave rippled through, sealing the node behind them. They tumbled back to the ship on frayed tethers, the debris field parting like a reluctant sea. Docking clamps engaged with a metallic kiss, and the airlock cycled them into safety. But as the core's energy flooded their systems, bathing the chamber in steady blue light, Lyra slumped against the wall, her suit's readouts flashing warnings. Radiation exposure, higher than they'd calculated. Torin helped her to the medbay, his face grim. We did it, Kale said, voice thick, but the cost lingered in the air, a silent promise that humanity's echoes demanded more than survival, they demanded remembrance. The flare raged on outside, but for the first time the stars felt a little less empty. The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered across Zara's scales, casting long shadows in the command chamber. She hunched over the interface, her claws tapping a frantic rhythm against the crystalline keys. The ship's hull groaned under the strain of the warp field's collapse, every vibration a reminder that time was bleeding away. Crick stood beside her, his broad frame tense, toolkit slung over one shoulder like an old scar. He wiped lubricant from his furred hands, eyes fixed on the holographic display where lines of ancient human code twisted like dying vines. It's holding, Crix muttered, his voice a low rumble. Barely. That jury-rigged stabilizer you slapped together, it's buying us minutes, not hours. Zara didn't look up. Her mind raced through the fragments they'd pieced together from the derelict archive. Humanity's final transmission, a blueprint not for conquest, but for symbiosis. The universe's extinction wasn't death. It was unraveling, a cascade failure in the quantum weave that humans had subtly reinforced for eons. Without their ingenuity, those clever, gritty networks of probes and AIs tending the cosmic balance, the fabric frayed. Stars dimmed, worlds cracked, and species like theirs withered in the void. Lyra's voice cut through from the comms panel, sharp and laced with that wry edge she never lost even now. Minutes? Splendid. I've got the council on the line, Half of them think we're delusional, the other half are prepping evacuation pods. Zara, if your plan backfires, we're the punchline to the galaxy's obituary. The earlier attempt had nearly ended them. Their probe into the core nexus, a human relic orbiting the galactic heart, had triggered a feedback surge, scorching Crix's arm and scrambling the ship's navs. They'd limped back, forcing a desperate adaptation, merging their tech with the human code not to mimic but to evolve it. Zara's caution had saved them then, pulling the plug before total meltdown. Now, with the weave tearing at their doorstep, caution felt like surrender. Locking the sequence, Zara said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her tail. She initiated the upload, the console humming as data streamed toward the nexus. Crix leaned in, adjusting the flow with a manual override, hissing through clenched teeth as sparks danced from the panel. The ship bucked. Alarms wailed, a rift blooming off the port bow, swallowing a nearby asteroid in a maw of fractured light. Lyra swore in her native dialect, fingers flying to reroute power. Incoming debris. Crix, seal the breach, now. He was already moving, toolkit clanging as he bolted for the engineering hatch. The corridor beyond shuddered, air whistling through microfractures. Crix slammed a patch over the hull split, his injured arm screaming in protest, but he held it firm until the sealant bonded. Sweat matted his fur. He could feel the cold seep in, a whisper of the vacuum's hunger. Back in the chamber, Zara watched the upload bar creep to 90%. The holographic weave pulsed erratically, threads snapping and reforming in erratic patterns. It's resisting, she whispered. The human design, it was meant for them, their neural patterns. We're forcing it. Lyra spun her chair, eyes fierce. Then make it ours. We've come this far on grit, not perfection. Talk to it, Zara, like you did with the archive. Zara hesitated, then keyed in a subvocal layer, not commands but echoes of their journey. Crix's unyielding repairs, Lyra's silver-tongued negotiations with ghostly data ghosts, her own patient unraveling of secrets. The code responded, not with compliance but adaptation, a ripple spreading through the display stabilizing the frayed edges. 100%. The hum deepened, resonating through the ship like a heartbeat. Outside, the rift hesitated, then sealed with a thunderous snap. Stars sharpened in the viewport, their light steadying as the weave knit anew. Crix staggered back in, clutching his arm, a grim smile cracking his muzzle. We did it. The Nexus is live, broadcasting the hybrid protocol. Every aligned system will pick it up. Lyra exhaled, slumping against the console. Council's silent. Shocked probably. Or finally listening. Zara rose, scales paling as she scanned the final readout. Triumph, yes. But the weave bore scars now, human ingenuity fused with alien resolve forever altered. Worlds would heal but some losses lingered, outposts gone dark, species on the brink. And humanity's absence? It echoed still, a void that had taught them the cost of isolation. As the ship steadied on its course, Crix clapped Zara's shoulder. Earned it, he said simply. She nodded, the weight settling. The universe breathed again, but they carried its first true scar.